What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime. It's not a tagline, it's our reality. And today it is Great Scott. It is time for your True Crime Phil, a show so good it happens every Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and you are in luck if you are here. Best guess, you know them by now if you've been watching the show. He is America's most respected detective, Fil Waters, spent decades in law enforcement, becoming an expert at obtaining criminal confessions. He spent 237 years at the Houston Police Department, investigating over 400 homicide cases. He looks excellent for his age. He is also a Marine and the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations, and he starred in the show The Interrogator, which he wished was called The Interviewer because that's what he does, and he does it well. And then we've got Agent Scott Duffey, the voice of wisdom, the soothing, calming persona that seems to be almost like massage therapy for a lot of the listeners. And he is here. He is the director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He is a former FBI supervisory special agent out of Wilmington, Delaware. He dealt in gangs, bank robberies, fugitive task force cases, and before that was a police officer for 5.5 years in the Commonwealth, not the state, but the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You can follow us on Facebook, Insta, Twitter. I post show times. It is at Podcast STS. Twitter, Podcast STS. You can become a YouTube member. You can follow us on Patreon. The merchandise store is open, and the great Carm, my mom, will be doing a special Patreon and YouTube member event on May 18th with a special best guest. Who knows? It could be Scott and Phil. You just don't know. We're still working it out, so maybe we'll get them in there for this. Be funny to see Carm and Phil. I would like to see that. They would talk. My mother at 83 recently went to a shooting range. She is a Second Amendment proponent, and I would love to see Fil Waters and my mom discussing firearms. It'd be quite funny. Let me start with a broad question, Fil Waters. This is definitely an open-ended question. This is not a closed question, as you've told me. By the way, Elizabeth is watching us from Hillsboro, Oregon.
Boy, they got some problems up there.
And by the way, the Skeeter Girl, there's our guys. Have the two of you watched the 1022 traffic stop of Bryan Kohberger? I hope they did, because we're going to talk about it today. Did you glean anything? We're going to get to that in a moment. STS from New England. So we've got everyone checking in here. And Phil's favorite state besides Texas, Great Scott from Catherine. It's Aloha Friday. Got to get my Joel, Scott, and Phil fix. Happy Cinco de True Crime from Maui. There you go. Forgot, it is Cinco de Mayo today, and that's why we see, I guess, a taco. I don't know here. LOL. I'm going to stay away from that.
Careful.
I'm going to stay far away from that because I remember our former president made a comment on Cinco de Mayo while eating a taco salad.
Well, it was his wife. It was
his wife. Didn't go over well. So
the lovely Jill, whatever her name is. Yeah.
I'm going to immediately veer away. Look at this. George from 7E has become a YouTube member. So Phil, very simple question. Why is America such a violent place?
Oh, you've asked me this before, and you know what my answer is. Sum it up in one word: sin. And I can tell you that I'm a student of history. And in fact, my minor in college was history. My major at Oklahoma State, I have a bachelor's degree in political science. And I have a master's degree in criminal justice management and leadership.
So you didn't wrestle, did you? Oklahoma State is one of the best wrestling schools in the country. Did you wrestle there?
Oh, yeah. Well, the National Collegiate Wrestling Hall of Fame is in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Well, but did you wrestle? I could have
Oh,
said
no. Not. I was on the powerlifting team, and I hung around with a bunch of football players and wrestlers and all that good stuff. And, we all, mine's bigger than yours, those kind of deals. That was another life.
okay. Back to violence in America.
But back to the question. So I will tell you this, and this will get them going. My study of history, if we go back into when did the United States as a nation begin to, on every moral level, begin to deteriorate? And my research takes me back to 1962, when the Supreme Court removed prayer from the schools. Then in 1963, the Supreme Court removed the reading of the Bible in schools. And then we moved through the 60s, and in 1965, we have this pervert named John Money, who comes up with the first rendition of this gender stuff. And his first victim was, it's a horrible story. I won't go into details here, but it ended up in being suicide for the young man that this guy went in and had butchered. Then you have Kinsey, who was the sexual revolution guy. And this is all happening in about the same time. Then you have the feminist movement, which is telling people, and look, I'm just making statements here, not stating an opinion. This is what happened. You have the feminist movement that gets going, and the beginning of the destruction of marriage, because women are told you don't need a man, you can do everything a man can do. But isn't it ironic that now we're in the reverse of that? We have men that think they can do everything a woman can do. So this is how perverted this has all become. And now we continue to move on. Then we have all the wrongs that went on during the Vietnam War, and the protests, and the breaking down of any kind of civil public discourse. Universities, ROTC buildings are being blown up. You've got homegrown terrorists. You've got the Weathermen. You've got SDS. You have all these different groups, the Black Panthers, these militant groups that are contrasted with the civil rights movement under the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King, which was nowhere near the militant movements. And I think, this is just my opinion, I think Dr. King would be abhorred at what's going on now. So,
and you think this is what has kind of by the way, send all hate mail this week to Scott Duffey. It is Scott Duffey at hateemail.com. Scott
look,
Duffey at hateemail.com.
you know me, Joel. I don't care what they say about me. I could care less. So I'm just answering your question. So to sum it up,
yeah,
I won't track it further because it's where we are now. So we have removed God from the school system, and then over time, and this happens incrementally. This is the way this happens. Mm-hmm.
But haven't men in particular always been killing other men? But it seems
they have. But look, you can go back into when the Israelites were freed from Egypt, and the Exodus with Moses. I mean, and all through biblical history, all through history, we have a constant. We have God, and we have His presence, and we have the people, and they move away from Him, and they start to worship Baal and Ishtar and all these, and Moloch. Look, this stuff, sacrificing babies and all this stuff. Look, this is all the old saying about if we don't pay attention to history, we're doomed to repeat it. Well, here we are. We're not paying attention. and we're repeating it. So we remove God from the public square. We remove the 10 commandments. We remove everything that has anything to do with good and grace and love. And what do? It's left up to whatever man's version of morality is. And here we are. So you watch the degradation of the moral fabric of this country being ripped asunder. And when America, just like the Israelites, when they turn their back on God, they bring about their own destruction. Now, people can argue with it, and I'm not trying to convince anything of anybody, but that is the historical perspective. And whether you agree with it or not doesn't make it not true. So that's a long answer to that question, but that's the bottom line. So that's where we are today. That's why people are so driven by hate, and hate manifests itself in many different ways. And one of those ways is to cause physical harm to other people.
And I bring it up, interestingly put, Phil. Again, hate mail goes to scottduffey@hatemail.com because it will be coming. By the way, Tali is in the Holy Land, the place where all religions intersect. Happy Global Friday, STS. Joel, congrats on 50K. So well deserved. I bet Fil and Scott have something to do with it, as they are the best guests and make Friday better. Not only do Fil and Scott have something to do with it, all the best guests do, but more importantly, STS Nation, the community. We have built an amazing community. So kudos to all of you. Scott, I see what Phil is saying. Religion does provide a certain sort of moral compass, but I bring this question about violence because it was a very violent week in America, and we'll get into it besides just Bryan Kohberger, but it seems, and there was a school shooting in Serbia this week, my mother's homeland. You guys will sort of getting a kick out of it is the wrong way, but I was discussing that with my mother. Serbians are considered to be some of the best fighters in the world. They are ruthless. And I asked her, what is going to happen? Because this was a young kid that gunned down like 8 people in his classroom in Serbia this week. And there was another mass shooting the next day. But I said to my mother, what will the Serbians do to this kid? Like from a judicial standpoint, my mother said, before the justice system gets this kid, one of the murdered kid's fathers will kill this kid. That's the way the Serbians exact revenge. So we'll see if that happens. But she says that they don't, as they like to say in America, they don't play. But Scott, to you, it seems like America seems to be a little more violent than other countries. What's your take on it? Do you have a thought as to why? And by a little, I mean a lot.
How much time are you allotting for this program, Joel?
17 seconds for this answer.
Okay.
That's my guy. That's my brother, Scott.
So it is about free choice, and you choose one or the other. You choose the right path, you choose the wrong path, you choose the peaceful path, you choose the violent path. And of course, sometimes there is a need for violence in the sense of defending peace and ultimately that's why law enforcement and the military carry weapons, right? It is the front lines for good, to ward off evil. So, there are so many reasons why violence seems to be more prevalent. Perhaps it's also because we seem to be connected digitally, right? So we see everything as it's happening, contemporaneous, as opposed to years ago. There's still plenty of violence, but it makes its way through a lot slower. And so we can talk about things pretty much real time. But I think Serbia is an example that even though we may have school shootings and mass shootings that seem to be off the hook and are extremely high, but no, I don't think any other country is protected and seems to have that magic pill as to why or why not it's happening. So it's disturbing, and yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how we get back to this this idea of peace. It seems to be a growing trend, an unfortunate trend.
And it's alarming. I mean, there's you basically hear about a mass shooting or a mass murder pretty much every day in this country. And
Well, Joel,
yes,
you
sir.
mentioned the school. You mentioned the schools. Look,
Yes.
these things started in about 1999, so it takes a couple generations for us to destroy the education system, and that is what happens. This all stuff happens incrementally. It doesn't
You're
happen.
talking about Columbine was the first big one, right?
You're right. And so, as we see these things progress and we watch our education system disintegrate before our eyes, and then when this Wuhan nonsense hits, now we've got these people destroying the schools and not teaching our kids. And we see all the negative results of that. And so now here we are, instead of educating our children, we are indoctrinating them into lies. So I'm telling you, just track it, just go through history and see how this thing has gone along. And I agree with Scott completely. That's the one thing that the Lord gave us was a freedom of choice. And right now, man in general are making horrible choices based on the fact that they have decided to reject that moral foundation.
That's something my dad always taught me. Everything is about free choice. So, Scott, he'd be proud of you. Abby Taha, Phil's adopted daughter. Hi, STS Nation. I have a serious question. What does the M stand for in NF Waters? I know the answer to that. Is it minivan Fil Waters? Question mark.
It is now. It is now.
It is.
But to answer my adopted daughter's question here, it is Millard Fillmore Waters II. Millard Fillmore was 13th president of the United States. He was a member of the Whig Party. He only became president, I think, because I think it was Pierce who died. And he did not get his nomination, his party's nomination to run. So he was really ineffective. He really didn't do much of anything. In fact, the only thing that he's really known for, and this is kind of legend, is that he put the first working toilet in the White House. So he got him from the outhouse to in the house.
Phil, I have a question. Did anyone ever call you Millard besides your mother? Did your mother say, Millard, get in the house when you were acting badly?
Not more than once.
Really? She called you Phil?
No, I never. The only person, well, good friends of mine will come up and say Millard, but I've been Phil, F-I-L, all my life. And there was my second grade teacher, Mrs. West, who insisted on calling me Millard because that was my first name. And I couldn't stand that woman. So,
let me ask you, when you acted out in school, would Miss West take a ruler and smack your knuckles? You can't do that anymore.
Yeah. She would, her technique was to, I got caught, we were in prefabs, prefab buildings. Yeah. I got caught one day climbing in and out of the windows with a buddy of mine. And so we were relegated to the cloakroom. So we got stuck in the corner in the cloakroom for a certain amount of time. That was our punishment.
By the way, I promise we're getting to true crime. I had Mrs. Fig in second grade, F-I-G-G. She wore a big bun. She had a freckly face. And it's hard to believe, even in my generation, Phil's a little older, but we would get smacked on the knuckles with a ruler. You imagine doing that today?
3-sided ruler, man.
Do you imagine that today? If someone smacked my kid with a ruler, my wife was beside herself because my 3.5-year-old, I heard, was taken to the principal's office the other day. I had a little talk with him, but it's probably because he's watching a little too much UFC with his father and decided to try to strangle one of his classmates. So I had a talk with him. I had a Fil Waters type talk, but I was just thinking what Thanksgiving dinner must be like around Fil Waters. I might invite myself to Phil's for Thanksgiving.
You're more than welcome. Bring your mom, Scott.
I'll bring my mom and my kid. But look at this. Phil and Carm would be something else. Maybe we should have Phil come on. It'd be hilarious. Hello from Germany. Nina. Hi, Nina. Hello from Greensboro, North Carolina. Hello from Boulder, Colorado. Hello from Sweden. We really covered the map here. Look at this. South Africa. Charnay Venter has been here before. So let's move on to some actual stories. I was not going to even mention the evildoer this week, Fil and Scott, but he was all over the news again last night. There were some FOIAs that were requested, Freedom of Information Act. And last night, for whatever reason, after many months, some dash cam footage was released of the evildoer about a month before the murders took place. And it happens in Pullman, Washington. He's pulled over by a Washington State University police officer during an October traffic stop. And you see him, Fil Waters. You see his face very clearly. And he says to the officer, I should say, says, "I think you know why I stopped you. You ran the red light." To which the evildoer responds, what actually happened is I was stuck in the middle of the intersection, so I was forced to go to the left. And then he went on in this whole diatribe. This video lasts about 9 minutes, saying that he was from a rural part of Pennsylvania and did not understand Washington state law. Look, if it was me, I would have said, "Sorry, officer," and I would have moved on. No one would really care about this, Phil, but the fact that he's a suspect in a quadruple homicide, people are going to really dissect the way he interacts and reacts. I didn't think it was really weird. I mean, I thought it was a little odd. He was confrontational in a benign sort of way, but was really peppering her about the law. What did you make of this, Phil?
I thought it was interesting. And yeah, you're right. I mean, it was this passive aggressive stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of weird.
Yeah.
Which adds to the weirdness of the whole thing, knowing what we now know. And my initial take on it is that when she said, "You know why I stopped you? You ran the stop sign." His kind of look at her is my sense is that he was thinking this was some kind of a setup, that something was about to happen beyond the scope of this traffic stop. But then he continues to drag this conversation out. And what he's doing, he's fishing. He's trying to see if there's something else going on here. I mean, are you kidding me? She ends up giving him what does she call it? The RCW, the Registered Criminal Law of Washington State, or some bull crap.
It goes on. It gets really like in the weeds. He really wants to know about laws related to the intersection. Yes.
Yeah, the laws about being in the intersection. So to me, that was a fishing expedition by him, that he was thinking that there's something else going on here. So he just kept that conversation going just to see how long it was going to go. And of course, she remained consistent with so forth and so on. Now, and she was very, we use the word professional, but she was very professional. She explained to him why she stopped and and then she ended up giving him a warning.
Yeah.
So I think for him, it was this weird, I just think it was a weird occurrence, and he wasn't really sure. And I would bet you, I'd love to have been a fly on the inside of that car, because I'm sure when he pulled off, that he is still, his head's on a freaking swivel. I have got to believe that he is like, holy crap, is this is they're going to do something here. And then when he finally got to wherever he was going, he may have calmed down some. But I thought it was an interesting, just kind of reading his body language and his facial expressions and what he was saying and how he was saying it. So it was really a cool thing to watch in my view.
Yeah, and Scott, I don't know if you had a chance to watch it because it came out late last night. Shivani writes, "Please ask Scott Duffey whether he thinks that Bryan Kohberger has a personality at all, or just a semblance of one, like an imitation of life. Before you answer that, I'll give you a little insight into what happened here, Scott. So he says to this officer, it's a female officer, and he says to her, "It never even occurred to me that was actually something wrong about this intersection." The officer explains to Kohberger that under Washington state law, drivers cannot enter an intersection unless there's enough space for the vehicle on the opposite side. And he says, "Can you explain that to me a little bit further?" Um, and she says, "You're just not supposed to block an intersection like that in Washington." He says, "I do apologize if I was asking you too many questions about the law." It was just, it was off a little bit for sure. But knowing that now and this question Shivani has for you, what's your response?
We all have a personality, so I'll say in short, sure, he has a personality just like anybody else, and whether what drives that personality, that's something that remains to be seen. But
He said he turned it off. He said he turned it off. I like it.
Low. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about an individual that dissects, right? Hangs on to every word, and if the officer said something that, from what we know now, he's getting a PhD in criminology, right? And so thereby this at least this idea of superiority and, hey, I'm studying this, and so thereby I'm a master at that, and I'm more geared towards to see at what point that the date of the car stop, does that coincide with one of the dates that law enforcement has where he's going back at least a dozen times in and around where the murders took place. So, the evidence of that is going to be, hey, he alone is operating in a control of a vehicle that is suspect in a quadruple homicide. So there's a lot to take away from it. Not so much the words that he's recorded saying, but more so putting him in that car prior to. And then, of course, we know from other highway patrol stops that definitely afterwards.
So, Scott, we can be sure that, Pullman police, Idaho police, they went back, looked at the date of this stop and looked to see if his phone records on that day maybe had him scoping out that house in Moscow, right? They're checking to see if the dates match.
Absolutely. And that's important because even though you're trying to each and every moment put him and him alone in that car, as opposed to whatever other friends, colleagues, or whatever have you, let's just say it's a multifamily car, and can you put him and him alone behind the car when it's arriving and when it's fleeing? And so every documented stop and occurrence of him being in that car just continues to solidify what they need to put together in a courtroom.
And that's interesting because he didn't commit the murders, the alleged murders at that time, but he could have had a guilty conscience if he was coming from 1122 King Road in Moscow. He might have been thinking, "Oh crap, did they see me there? Did they think I'm up to something?" Ketchup, bonjour from Paris, missing STS fam. Rough life, Ketchup. I've seen you on social a couple times. You're all over the place. Hope you're having fun. Paris. I'm hoping to get there one of the. I was supposed to go a few months ago, and it didn't happen. Fil Waters, before you were living the glamorous life of a homicide detective, you were a street cop, as they say. How dangerous is it each and every time you pull someone over in a vehicle? You don't know if you got a serial killer, right?
Well, all traffic stops, when I taught street survival, we taught traffic stops. And
by the way, Garth Brooks went to school in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
He did.
Yeah,
he did. He was there many years after I was there. But yes, he's from Stillwater. Well, he's actually from Yukon, Oklahoma, but I believe, and he did go to school at Oklahoma State. Yes, indeed.
Sorry to interrupt, Phil.
Home of the Cowboys.
So
what was your question, Joel?
Traffic stops. That's open-ended. Traffic stops, Phil.
Traffic stops. Yes. My mad cow kicked in, my short-term memory there. Well, and I used to give instruction in street survival, and we would practice the way to properly conduct traffic stops, felony traffic stops, and so forth and so on, any kind of contact with the public. And what the two words or the three words that were always false, and I always clarify this: routine traffic stop. No such thing. No such thing. So every traffic stop has to be approached as though you've got somebody sitting in the car that wants to kill you because you're a police officer. And that's the way I conducted my business. And we're trained to make those observations, do the things we need to do to make sure that those things don't happen. And then the handling of prisoners, of course, putting them in the back of a car, making sure they're handcuffed. I worked a couple of officer-involved killings where the person was handcuffed, put back in the back seat of the patrol car behind a cage, and yet they missed a firearm on their person in the search. And both those officers were shot from behind while they sat in the driver's seat. So traffic stops are a dangerous, I would say, on a consistent basis, one of the more dangerous activities on a daily basis that these patrol officers, these harness bulls out there will engage in.
And that's why law enforcement should get a lot of respect, because they do a very dangerous job. You never know if you're running into a suspected serial killer, a guy accused of killing 4 people. That officer obviously had no idea what was to come, as no one else did either. Baby doll, Scott, I know you didn't see the video, but is it me, or did the evildoer look heavier in the newest video that was just a month before the murders? Wonder if he was getting more fit or doing drugs. Looks sort of similar to me, maybe a touch beefed up. But to Baby Doll's point, Scott, will they also be looking at that? Will they be looking at his physicality? Will they be? I mean, if you're investigating this and you're now looking at these traffic stop videos, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, wait, and we've seen him heavier and lighter at different parts of his young adulthood. So, whether it be drug involved or diets or whatnot. I mean, I'm not so much looking at the different characteristics, especially, I didn't see it, but the cameras also can be off on, whether they add pounds or take away pounds or make somebody look this way or that way. So I wouldn't put a whole lot into that. I'd just be concentrating on who's behind the wheel of the car that is object of a quadruple murder, and each and every day, and there may be more out there. So where you have law enforcement combing through their videos, just imagine dash cams and body cams, and you have thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of footage that routinely do not get checked. And then you have supervisors that will randomly check things unless of course a case pops up and an item is pulled. But otherwise, there's plenty of footage out there that's just simply getting filed away into a cloud. So I wouldn't put too much into what looks like whether he's heavier or not. I would be, of course, I would be looking at the what's already been in the affidavit, bushy eyebrows and the height and weight and so forth like that.
Anna Rogers. My father's name was Millard. Good Norwegian name.
She's correct. I did the ancestry DNA, .com thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And So I do have some very small percentage, but something up in Norway, Sweden, and that kind of thing. But then the other part is mainly Irish, Scotch-Irish, and English, German, and I am also a citizen of the Cherokee Nation by blood. So there you go.
That's the Oklahoma in you.
And I actually have a card. You know, I'm not like some people that have claimed it. I actually have a card from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and from the Cherokee Nation showing my citizenship. So yes,
I would like to see
I'm
that.
documented, by the way.
That's cool. There you go.
Yeah, oh, and let me make a correction. So I said I thought it was Pierce that died. It was actually Zachary Taylor.
Please send all hate mail to scottduffy@hatemail.com. Annie says, I could see Mills from Millard. We call my William Wills. Who knows? Abby, Phil's daughter, says that Bryan Kohberger video is odd. I think he might be on the autism spectrum. His behavior was awkward. That is for sure. So, Fil Waters, to you. So we got some more detail from previously unsealed court records. It turns out there was other video, by the way. There was video of the Pullman University Police, I believe, or maybe state police. I'm not sure which jurisdiction, to be honest, of them going in, executing a search warrant. But this is when Kohberger was already back in Pennsylvania. And they say, Phil, we also noticed while clearing the apartment, it was sparsely furnished and fairly empty of belongings, including no shower curtain in the bathroom, and the trash cans appeared empty, and his own bedroom door was locked. What would you make of that, Phil? As the savvy investigator you are, you go into a home where a person is living, there is no shower curtain, he's gone, and he has also locked his bedroom door. What's going on here in his mind?
Well, given what we know, I don't think that's terrible. You know, he's got a certain level of weirdness. I don't know what he was thinking, of course, to not have a shower curtain. Who knows? Who knows what he was into? The door being locked, I don't know that's. It would depend on what was found behind the door, I guess, for me to even give an opinion about why that was done. So what was behind that door? Why would you lock the bedroom door in your own apartment, since you're the only one, presumably, that's going to have access to it? So that is a little odd, but that might be explained by what's behind it.
And George brings up an interesting point, and I could do a 9-hour show today because I have so much to get through. But George from 7E, Scott, this is interesting. It showed his narcissism and arrogance, in my opinion, lack of respect for authority, particularly a woman. He was saying, well, actually, blah, blah, blah. Makes me feel he was a nightmare as a teaching assistant, OMG. We've heard that he has, kind of two ways of approaching things, one way for men and one way for women. And it is a good point. It was a female police officer. Do you think that if it was a male officer that he would have been questioning this traffic stop as much, Scott, or do you have no idea? And I'm just asking you a question that you don't know the answer to.
Yeah, I don't really have a leaning one way or the other. I mean, we are seeing some reports, whether it be interviews done by journalism or something else that's come out with regards to how he's treated people at a bar or a place where he's gone to or the school that he was at, and especially students. I know that's out there, and you could probably make a case one way that he treats women differently than men, and is that going to sway? Is that going to have anything to do with the actual trial? I would say no. People are forming their opinions, but we have to remember there is a male that is a victim of these 4 quadruple homicides, even though I think there's probably some evidence to show that that was just a circumstance. He comes across somebody and then has to act. in a way. So whether or not he was a target, we'll see what happens as this unfolds more so in June. But yes, it's there. There are more and more reports, and the evidence is through body cams and other reports of how he treats women versus how he treats his male counterparts. But I don't. It will add to ultimately, I think, whatever the motive is that's decided at trial. But outside of that, irrelevant.
Future writes, this one is for Phil. Go Pokes. No idea what that
Go
means.
Pokes.
Are the Pokes Oklahoma State?
Oklahoma State Cowboys. You bet.
Oh, there you go. Okay, there you go. Go Pokes. So Phil, another thing. So the Pullman police chief, a woman named Dawn Daniels, we go back in time here, said, I guess they were checking out the storage area that he kept separately. The door was not locked, so she asked a judge for a search warrant, which they got, saying that it is also believed the storage closet could contain or contains certain trace evidence, blood or other bodily fluid or human tissue or skin or cells. Apparently, I have not seen this, but I did hear this on multiple media outlets that red stain that we once heard about on this pillowcase was a presumptive positive for blood. Phil, what does that mean if that is true? And what about this storage area containing, according to the police chief, trace evidence, blood or other bodily fluid or human tissue or skin cells? She said she believed that could be the case, and that's why they wanted the search warrant, which they were granted. Whether they found that or not is not 100% certain, but if that was a presumptive positive for blood, what does that tell you? Anything or no? It could be blood from his nose, right?
It's just another piece of evidence because it's going to have to be further analyzed to determine whose blood is it. In terms of the other items in that search warrant, when they drafted the search warrant, the affidavit for the search warrant, that's what they were going in after. I don't think they're going to. Now, then when they do the warrant return, they have to leave what they've taken out of the house. So whatever they got into that storage area, and if they got into the storage area and whatever they took out of the storage area is not going to say retrieved a hair, it's going to say retrieved a piece of clothing or so forth and so on. So you're going to get other pieces, and I haven't seen what was recovered out of that particular search warrant in that storage area. So whatever was recovered in there is going to be sent for further analysis.
Marshall Dove. Hey, STS Nation and Joel, watching with my son Jackson from Richmond, Virginia. He's just home from college. Hello, Marshall. Hello, Jackson. Jackson, make sure you're taking criminology classes and make sure you become either a detective or a FBI agent, because these guys spend half the year in Hawaii. They've got beach houses, and I just want to make sure that you're doing it right. So whatever classes you are currently taking, make sure you drop out of them and become a law enforcement officer.
Oh, no, I wouldn't. No.
Phil is saying no.
I wouldn't tell anybody to do that in today's world.
For some reason, my chat is frozen up, so I can't move around comments here. But better that than our entire picture here going down. Let's see. It could be the chief marketing officer messing around, but I can't move around my comments. Anyway, so Phil, go Pokes. We're talking about Oklahoma State, your home state. Horrific story out of that state this week. Investigators are now trying to figure out if some victims of a mass killing there, which is blamed on a registered sex offender who spent 20 years or was sentenced to 20 years in prison, if these victims were sexually assaulted before these crimes took place. So this registered sex offender, is a guy named Jesse McFadden. He was 39 years old. He fatally shot his wife, her 3 children, and their 2 friends, and then killed himself. McFadden was sentenced to prison for 20 years after pleading no contest to rape in 2003. Back then, he was accused of assaulting a 16-year-old girl. So he served 17 years because he was released in 2020. He married this woman a year ago. Their first anniversary would have been in May. Why was a registered sex offender allowed to be around all of these children? I mean, he served his time. So I guess you could make that argument, but is there anything that could have been prevented or done to prevent this? Because people are rightfully enraged, and we'll get a little deeper into this. But I'm sure you heard about the case. What did you make of this from the great state of Oklahoma?
Well, it is. It's horrible. These things are horrible, and as my practice is, I don't mention these evildoers' names. And of course, my question when I first read this article and I don't know that I've seen it anywhere, what the original sentencing was, and then why he was released after 17 years. So, unless you've got that information there, Joel, I don't know what the original sentence was.
Let me look here. It was he pleaded no contest to a rape, but I don't know. I guess it was for that, but he pleaded no contest and was then sentenced to rape.
So I guess he was sentenced to 17 years, and he did almost the whole 17. Is what I'm reading.
Well, he sentenced to 20, and he did 17. Correct.
He did 17. Okay. So he does his time. He gets out, but he is compelled to register. He's a registered sex offender. And once the disposition of the case, once that has been fulfilled, unless there was some kind of other, I don't know what the laws are in each state about registered sex offenders and what guidelines they have to follow. But in terms of him having another relationship with someone and marrying them, and they have children and daughters and so forth and so on, I don't know that there's any restriction. I mean, he went on and he living his life, and the unfortunate part of this huge tragedy is that the woman that he married, what a horrible miscalculation of character, and we don't know what the dynamics were between them. But at the end of this horrible incident is we got 7 people dead, and it's again, I go back to how we started this thing. It's just there are just factors around here that cause people to do bad things to other people, and again, anything like this, anytime you've got husbands and wives killing each other, killing the children, I mean, there's just no, it's just pure evil. There's no explanation. I mean, you can kind of see why this happened and so forth and so on, but in terms of stopping it, I can tell you, I've said before many times, you can put a cop on every corner in every city, in every state throughout this country. And if someone is determined to go kill someone else, they're going to go do it. So evil in the world, sin in the world today.
And that's why we started with that big question. The chief medical examiner, Scott Duffey, said that his office, quote unquote, examined each decedent for physical signs of sexual assault and obtained standard evidence samples, including those for possible sexual assault, like establishing beyond a doubt scientific ID. It will take a little time to put all the evidence together to confidently assert that sexual assault occurred, but they think that it did prior to this rampage where he killed 6 others and himself. I mean, Scott, just your, by the way, Angela says, my God, a sex offender will always be a sex offender. They cannot be rehabilitated. Let's start there. Do you agree with her?
I mean, you go with history, you go with evidence. So, I'm a firm believer that in free will choice. And so if you can make a choice, you can move forward, you can change, you can be redeemed, all the above. But what are the odds of somebody doing it? They're very low. Sexual offenders are often repeat offenders, but you can say that for many other different crimes of whatever it, where people come out and recidivism is high. So recidivism in the sexual assault, sexual rape arena, whether it be of a child or of an adult, you often have repeat offenders, right? It is such a difficult series of crimes, or to try to put your finger on, say, how do we resolve and solve it? But it makes sense that, if you have, as our behavioral science unit at the FBI has done tremendous work to talk to people of this nature, and to try to get into their head, and so often you have an individual that has gone away for sexual assault or rape for a very long time, but then they've served that time and they come out, and the urge remains. Maybe the rehabilitation, maybe whatever it is, counseling is either low or non-existent. So now they're out, faced with their own demons and their own temptations, and they just make another choice, right? Another bad choice. However, now they've learned. And what have they learned? I had somebody that pointed the finger at me, and that's how I went to jail. And then what do? I got to remove that witness. And so it will be interesting to see if that's what this comes down to, where, as we talked on another show, why do these serial killers and other tremendously horrible killers all of a sudden have this tremendous fan mail of everybody wanting to marry them and be with them? So is it possible that he gets out? It's possible that this unsuspecting woman, whether she knows or doesn't know truly of his history, and so now she and her whole family are subject to whatever might have led up to this murder, sexual assaults and rapes. And now it's time to deal with it head on, because you have witnesses. And so it'd be interesting to see if that's exactly what has taken place, and remove the witness and then remove everybody else around that witness. This is, unfortunately not unique.
Apparently he had gotten a new job, a pretty decent job, and everything was going okay. And something did trigger him where he thought he was going to get in trouble again, from what I have read.
Yeah.
George from 7E writes, giving us a little more info here. He was set to go to court on the day after discovery for another sex offense from while he was behind bars, contraband, cell phone, child pornography, and soliciting minors, but he was still released. By the way, thank you, Roadrunner. Appreciate that, becoming a YouTube member. And he says mostly children. Phil, this is where it gets pretty demented here. So an attorney for the victim's family, one of the victim's families, a guy named Cameron Spaulding, said that the family fears that this guy, Jesse McFadden, recorded these rapes prior to killing these people. The family of Ivy Webster, one of the victims, was shocked to discover that computers and cell phones had not been secured by law enforcement, and goes on to say that no words can express his family's fear that the sexual assault of their baby girl has been placed on the dark web. There's some images that have been leaked of this, I guess. The videos show handcuffs. You can see this online. Bondage collars around the bed, lubrication in a laundry room, books on witchcraft, sex toys in a master bedroom, as well as a chain hooked to the wall behind the bed. Phil, you walk into this crime scene. What the hell is going on in your mind? Have you ever seen a crime scene like this?
I've not seen one to that extent, but you walk in there. It's at first blush, you just kind of look and see what you got, and you just get down to doing the job, letting the evidence lead you where you need to be, and collecting the things that you need to collect to bring about, hopefully, some measure of justice later on. But I'm sure there's going to be they're going to find on the cell phones, or they're going to find in closets or boxes. They're going to find pornography. This is all part of one incestuous undertaking. These guys that are into this stuff, they all have these same components. And that's another, Joel, you're asking about how do we get to where we are? Well, look, in 1964, I think it was, they were trying to decide what pornography was. So the Supreme Court justice at that time, Potter Stewart, says, I may not be able to define pornography, but I know what it looks like when I see it. So here we are now today, decades later, and the United States is the largest producer of pornography in the world. So another breakdown, another rip in the moral fabric. And when guys like this, and it's brought into our lives in all sorts of different mediums. That's one thing. These cell phones, these computers, the web. I mean, the proliferation of everything that's wrong is at our beck and call. And there are people out there that are greatly influenced because it becomes an addiction for them. And they become greatly influenced by these things. And then when they get to the far end of the spectrum, where the violence starts to have a sexual component to it, that's when you have a guy like this evildoer who does what he does. And I mean, again, let's go back to my first answer to your first question.
Is there any way, Phil, to, I don't know, at least keep, I mean, there were these young girls that were visiting the wife's children. I mean, obviously you can't micromanage, especially in a country with 330, 40 million people like ours, but does something more have to be done so these sex offenders, when they get out, just simply cannot be around children? Or is that an impossible thing to patrol and keep up with? It's impossible, right?
Well, it's the same equivalent to protective orders, temporary restraining orders, and family violence incidents. I'm going to tell you, that makes a bunch of politicians feel good. But the reality is that piece of paper doesn't mean one freaking thing to the person that is determined to go wreak havoc on their wife or their children or other family members or anyone else. So the reality here is that these pieces of paper, that's why they call them criminals, because they don't follow the laws. And as many have tried to regulate behavior by issuing a piece of paper, I'm sorry, that's just not reality. Just not.
Lutefisk Limeade writes, I don't think sex offenders can change, and once they've committed a crime like that, they should be buried under the prison. So this is the court of public opinion. One more piece of information related to this story, and then we'll move on to the next horrible story, Scott, in case you didn't think there were any more. Plenty more where that came from. This same lawyer who's worried that these sexual assaults were recorded and released on the dark web prior to this mass killing said sheriff's deputies collected iPads and a cell phone only after the family complained. However, the grandmother, Shannon Boykin, took cell phone videos inside Jesse McFadden's house Thursday afternoon that shows some computer equipment is still there. The fact that the guy who committed these crimes is dead, does that change anything with regards to the investigation, or should all the electronics still have been collected right away? Does the family make a point here? It sounds like they left some, computer hardware around that could potentially have evidence. Should that have been taken right away?
I would think so. I would like to know a little bit more as to why certain things are left behind. Why take one and not all? That would strike me odd if that report is correct. If you have 3 computers and one is removed, why? Why not all 3? If you have, one phone taken and not 2 or 3, whatever, unless they were hidden, but if they're there in plain view and they're not removed, it's also possible, with card examiners. These are computer forensic examiners. They come in, they do a they can do a I'm not the computer expert, but we will invite them into our investigations, and they will take care of all the devices, and it's possible that they're able to see if anything is on the device immediately, and perhaps recognize that nothing of evidentiary value is there. But otherwise, if shy of that happening, you would want to remove everything, because even if it's not going to be used as evidence in a court, you definitely want to destroy any such image that may exist on a device. I mean, is where we're at today. You have the cloud, you have just unimaginable file sharing between, these child pornographers, and it's just, to try to shut down, remove, destroy, even if it's not going to be used as evidence because, the interested party is dead. But it sounds like, as more information comes out and is out with regards to this, that there were plenty of pieces of information that might have been overlooked. And, and it'd be interesting to see what his probation was. So he's a registered sex offender, so he probably can't be in a school. He probably can't be in any place where there are juveniles. But of course, that's not going to prevent him from being in his own household where somebody has entered in, a family has been there of their own free will. It's just like a felon in possession. He can't be in possession of a weapon, right? But if someone is living in a household with someone who's not a convicted felon, there are supposed to be these, well, keep it in a lockbox, keeps it there, et cetera, et cetera. But there are ways around it, and ultimately, what's the law can do? What can the law do to prevent this? I mean, shy of not releasing because of the cell phone and other contraband, but child pornography beyond that, that would strike me as, I would be very interested to know if you had child pornography there and then you're released pending charges with the very, on the very fact that you have been convicted for that. I'd be very surprised that he wasn't further detained. I think there will be a lot more coming out with regards to that aspect.
The possibility may be, and I had a case like this, wasn't involving child pornography, but it was involving a computer geek who had murdered his wife, or not his wife, his mother's child, but they were living together. Anyway, and we found, I want to tell you, 3 or 4 different laptops and desktops in the apartment, and all the hard drives had been removed. So there may be a possibility that in this particular case, those computers that were left may have had the hard drives removed, or as Scott has talked about, their forensic computer analysts have come in there and looked at those laptops, and determined there was no probative evidentiary value to them. So there's always an explanation for things that and sometimes there's just a mistake made. But I would think leaving 3 laptops or computers behind is not a mistake. That was purposeful.
Phil, I have an odd question because I'm imagining you at this crime scene. How the hell do you go and process this crime scene? I know you're there for maybe, many, many hours, but then how do you then go home and have dinner with your wife and have a normal conversation after what you just saw? How's that even possible? I mean, she's talking about, you know, what the kids did in school that day, and you just saw 7 dead people. 5 of them, or 4 of them, or 5 of them were children. How do you possibly go home and function normally after that?
Well, and this will get all the,
Oh
my
boy.
friends all shook up again as well.
Oh boy.
But, I'm grounded in my faith. And I think, well, I don't think, I know that God puts us where he wants us. That's where he put me. And that would allow me to be able to be empathetic and compassionate with the victims' families. And my wife was a perfect cop's wife. She would ask me about the day, and I would give her some of those details. So she was kind of my cathartic sounding board to, if I needed to get something out, then I got it out. But very rarely did I bring that stuff home with me. I mean, in terms of laying awake at night and that kind of thing, I didn't work when I was in my home, and I think that was a good philosophy to have. I saw a lot of guys that had just begun in homicide, and they would forward their office phones to their cell phones, and they were taking stuff home with them and doing a report. And I told them, you got to stop that. You got to quit. That stuff's all going to be here tomorrow morning when you come back. You've got to go someplace that's peaceful, that you can decompress and come back and hit it hard the next day. But you'll burn yourself up and out if you practice that 24/7, that you've got to be engaged in all things at all times.
By the way, is there a Millard Fillmore the third now?
Negative.
Negative.
I did not
How come?
burden my son with that moniker. And in fact, his name is Shane. And the reason he was named Shane was because my mother wanted to name me Shane after the movie with Alan Ladd.
Which I don't know.
And it didn't happen. It ended up being my grandfather, his Miller Fil Waters the first, but no. So I named my son with a name that I should have been named when I was born.
Learning more and more about Phil. El Rose. I love the name El Rose. Speaking of names, I had a feeling it was going to be a horror crime scene. His cellmate, this guy's cellmate, said he had to sleep with one eye open, followed by this question, Scott Duffey from Future. Okay, I'm sorry, but why would a mother have her 3 children in a house with this man? The wife, who was also unalived, married this monster last year. I will never understand ever. I guess it comes back to what you're saying, Scott Duffey. Free choice. People make bad decisions, I guess, right?
Yeah, they make bad decisions, or they make the decisions with the information they have. So I don't know. It sounds like it's pretty recent. A year or so they're married. I don't know, and he got out just a few years ago, right? So it's there's not a whole lot of history that she can go upon other than him saying, okay, this happened long ago and it's no longer a part of my life. And she takes him at his word, but she doesn't. I don't know. And unfortunate, she is now the victim of, and her whole family, the victim of this monster. So, so many years I've just seen unfortunate people who just are ignorant. They say ignorance is bliss. Not here, right? And I don't know if she did her homework. I don't know if people told her, "Are you crazy?" and "Don't go with this guy." And I don't know if she Googled him. I don't. That's an unfortunate. And unfortunately for today, that's pretty much what is necessary when people are coming to adults with two histories that are unknown, and people have to do their background. They just have to. But especially here, you have to put others first, if not your own, and realize, hey, I may be in love with somebody. I'm not quite sure who I know what they're about, but I have other people I have to protect, and we see it time and time again. I don't want to cast any disparage on this individual. I would hope in certain regards that this person just had absolutely no clue, and and now everybody else is kind of picking up the pieces. Maybe you know, but this is not a unique situation, and so people have to wake up to this and just say, I have to put my love interest second and do a background and really get to know who I am with, right? And then make a move forward.
Abby Taha sounding a bit like she's now Phil's actual daughter. It is absolutely possible to stop a predator once and for all. Castration. Sounds like something my friend Phil might say. L. Rose. Admittedly, I mean, I know the story, but I don't know all the details the way I know, let's say, Lori Vallow. But she writes, how was his cellmate writing to Holly, his wife? He even said he told police Jesse was living with minors. Police did nothing. That's two that alerted police. The original victim did as well. Phil, could there be liability if all of this is true on the police department?
Well, everybody wants to blame the police, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't know because as we already discussed, I don't think he was on probation or parole. It sounds to me as though he did 17 years of a 20-year sentence and got released because he may have had some good time. So it sounds to me like he did his time. And upon his release, I do not know if there are any restrictions in terms of him being a registered sex offender. Or and look, people are going to do what they do. Again, you can put all these restrictions on people all day long. You can do it from now to the second coming. It isn't going to make any difference. If he has a relationship with this woman and she marries him and they're living under the circumstances they're living, I don't know that the law enforcement or the law can do anything about that in terms of removing him from that house or removing them from him. I just don't think that's within the scope of the law. So you have what you have. People make decisions to do things and engage with people, and too many times it turns out to be some huge tragedy like this. So we can talk about laws, and look, again, I'll say it again. That's why they call these people criminals. They don't follow the laws. We have all these laws out here about this and that and blah, blah, blah. And all these people that base everything on emotion think that the law is going to solve everybody's problems. Well, that's just not true. That's not reality. So look, I was in law enforcement for 33 years, worked homicide for 23. I've been all over the world. Cops are cops and crooks are crooks. And the law-abiding citizens are the ones that suffer for the activities that crooks take part in. And if these people that want to cry all the time about we need more laws about this, we need more laws about that, they can describe to me that one law that's going to take care of all these problems, and I'm on board with them. But they'll never find it because it doesn't exist. That's the reality. They can disagree with me all they want to, but again, look at history, look at what people do, look at how the human experience acts out, and you don't make laws that are the only people that are going to suffer because of them are the law-abiding citizens. So I'm just saying that, you know, it's a great academic discussion to talk about laws this and laws that, and could the law have done this and that. But I'm telling you, the reality is, with human beings, with people, there ain't a piece of paper out there that's going to keep them from doing what they've decided they want to do.
By the way, STS Nation, let me know if you like kind of this series of stories that we don't normally cover during the week, because there's a few more I want to get through within the remaining 15 minutes or so. By the way, Phil, you're not alone. So let me know if you like that. If you like kind of volleying through a bunch of stories that we don't normally cover. Case in Mantel. My name was supposed to be Kristen. Instead, it was Catherine. I named my second daughter Kristen. She's following the Millard Fillmore's mother's school of thought. Meanwhile, here's some more information I didn't know from Elle Rose. The poor grandmother said he never let her see the grandkids. This guy, Jesse McFadden, he moved them all 2 hours away. Classic controlling behavior. Andy School, a wise man, says, speaking to Phil's daughter, studies have shown that if the offender, speaking about castration, is more after control, the decreasing hormonal drive doesn't work. The offender's thoughts remain that of dominating their victim. They use other items. Interesting. Let's move on, though, because we've got limited time. So there's another horrible story. This one involves a homeless man in New York City on the subway, choked to death. The homeless man was named Jordan Neely. He was killed by another subway passenger who held him in a chokehold for several minutes. And by several minutes, I believe it was 15 minutes. This was all videotaped. So again, you can see this online. Apparently, this homeless person, Scott, said, I don't have food. I don't have a drink. I'm fed up. I don't care if I go to jail and they give me life in prison. I'm ready to die. And started making threats and got in people's face. And this 24-year-old passenger, who happens to be a Marine like Fil Waters, got this guy in a chokehold, and the guy was still kind of thrashing around and being wild. And lo and behold, this homeless man is now dead. I think he kept the chokehold on, if I'm correct, for 15 minutes, which, by the way, it wouldn't have been done very properly, because a proper chokehold will have you unconscious in seconds. But some people are calling this guy a hero, this Marine, and others are saying he's a killer. You have a thought one way or the other? And by the way, this isn't Texas. This is New York City. So stand your ground, things of that nature. It is a different beast in New York City. People are up in arms about this. Again, it is split, though. There are people who say this guy did the right thing. What say you, Scott Duffey? So you can get some hate mail, too.
Yeah, I mean, and if I could ask, not that's going to change my opinion, but was the Marine charged or just pending?
He was not charged. It was ruled a homicide, which I never.
Sure.
Homicide is not a legal term, from what I understand. It's just it's a manner of death, right? A medical term, correct? So it was ruled a homicide, but he has not been charged, as far as I know.
Yeah, from what you're saying, Joel, it sounds like he stepped in. You either ignore it and walk away and let somebody else deal with somebody who is let's take away his circumstances of being homeless. I mean, so homeless is a plight throughout the world, whether it be there's mental illness associated with it, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, somebody made a decision to enter into that subway and then to become extremely aggressive. And so somebody made a decision before it became physically aggressive, right? It's going to start at hey, I'm going to do this and I'm testing you, no different than however anybody else, as their behavior continues to exacerbate and change and become more aggravated. At what point do you intervene? And so somebody made a choice to intervene and protect others. That's the way I see it, and probably had no intent other than I got to stop this person who's thrashing around, and the best way I know how is to grab them in such a way. Maybe he was intending and hoping to do the carotid and to put some pressure on it, and then ultimately have somebody stop thrashing about. But it didn't work that way, and so when somebody is violently um, being non-compliant, it's nice if everything in a perfect academy way. Oh, let me go ahead and put a little pressure on the carotid, and then get them to go unconscious, as opposed to when somebody's grab the trach, and then it becomes a choke out. So it's unfortunate, right? It's absolutely unfortunate. But here's a person who intervened, in my opinion, and it just grew an escalation and unfortunate circumstance that somebody lost their life. But who knows, if that person didn't intervene, somebody could have been assaulted. If not, it sounds like this person was just escalating to, if nobody stops me, then I'm going to hurt, if not kill somebody. So in my opinion, somebody stepped up, and it became a fight for life, and a life was lost. But there are many situations where somebody steps up, life is not lost, and it still was a violent act, but it was in defense of everybody else, and it's not a story, right? It's a story because somebody lost their life, but it doesn't change the circumstances that somebody stepped in and tried to protect not only himself but others. That's the way it sounds, and we'll see if the evidence supports that.
Cheerio Shell, thank you for this. Going back to Oklahoma for a second. The perp in Oklahoma hired, I did read about this, hired an actress to say she was the victim. She told the girlfriend that she was 19, not 15, and that it was a misunderstanding. I don't even know if I fully understand all this, but I did read that this was the case. The goal was to convince her to marry the people. It worked. I mean, it sounds like you're going a long distance to make things happen, but I did read that. Michelle Logan, thank you. New subscriber here, enjoying this format very much. Learning a lot. Thank you. One of the smartest shows on YouTube, not because of me, but because of the guests. Back to this story. Annie letting us know this is true. 2 others helped the Marines subdue this guy. Fil Waters. I like to ask these questions every once in a while. Abby's saying, I'm Team Marine. This is not Texas. This is New York City, a much different place. I believe you said your daughter was, or is living in New York City.
My granddaughter.
Your granddaughter. Let's say
is going to Pratt.
Fil
The art
Waters.
school.
Let's say you and your granddaughter were taking the A train. I don't know what train they were on. And a homeless man was belligerent and getting in your face, maybe even tried to, feint a smack your way. What would have happened, Fil Waters?
He would have been immediately subdued.
Interesting. And with a chokehold, or how would it have happened?
With whatever I would need to use to bring
I like
that
that
about.
answer. On that note,
let me say something about this real quick.
Yes.
The medical examiner has said it ruled it a homicide. Well, that's fine and dandy. That's a medical legal term related to the manner of death. There are criminal homicides. There are non-criminal homicides. Now, I've seen this video. I've watched this Marine take care of the business at hand that he needed to take care of. This guy has been arrested 44 times. He's a known quantity all along those subways, threatening people. And he was doing stuff that day that were threatening other riders on the subway. So he took action to protect those people on that subway. And there were 2 other, like this person just said, 2 other people assisted him. Now, I will tell you this business about saying every time somebody's got their arm around somebody's head is a chokehold is another piece of misinformation. So I've seen the video. I've watched what the Marine did. He didn't have the guy in a chokehold. It doesn't take 15 minutes to choke anybody. When you exercise a full Nelson or a chokehold to disable somebody quickly, let me tell you what, if you've ever had it done to you, and I was in the martial arts for years, and I've had it done, and I can tell you that when that is the purpose, is to bring that person into a moment of unconsciousness, it happens like that, and then it's released. So to say that this Marine sat there and choked this guy for 15 minutes is absolute nonsense. That's not what he did. So at best, what he's got is this guy in a headlock, kind of a pseudo headlock.
Correct.
He is simply holding onto the head, because once you get a hold of the head, and I always taught in our defense classes, when you're out there and you have to tussle and you have to fight with a suspect, and I've done it myself, if they've got hair on their head, you get a hold of that hair and you hold on to it, because where the head goes, the body's going to follow. So I don't see him doing anything other than controlling this person. And the two people with him were keeping his legs down and all that kind of thing. So we need to see, I heard somebody the other night say that the ME said that it was due to compression of the neck. I haven't read that anywhere, that they've come out with the results of the autopsy. Now, unless you have, I mean, I just haven't seen that. What people need to wait for is, why did he die? Why did he die? Did he have some inherent medical condition already? What kind of controlled substances or alcohol did he have in his system that may have been a contributing factor to this? And because of the physical exertion that he was in the midst of at the time, that all these components came together, and he died later at the hospital. Yeah. So, and of course, we get this stuff on video and we see these little clips, and everybody starts going nutty about, and people, there are people out there, the reality is, there are people out there who do nothing but look on the interwebs for just these kind of events so that they can turn this thing into something that it is not. And so it happened 2 or 3 years ago up in Minnesota. So I'm just telling you that these kinds of things, they take on a life of their own based on whatever the agenda is for those certain people that are watching these things. So I tell you what, I'm not a big Eric Adams fan, the mayor of New York, but I will give him kudos that in this particular incident, he has stood up and said, everybody needs to calm down. Let's let this investigation go forward, and let's see what happened. Because look, the Marine and those two individuals were interviewed the night that this happened, and they were released by NYPD detectives. Yeah. What that tells me is that his actions and the other two people, because look, those other two folks, if you wanted to get this really crazy, under the law of parties, I don't know what it is in New York, but in Texas, under the law of parties, let's just say for the sake of this discussion, that he's charged with murder. Those other two people participating in it could also be charged. So I'm just saying that people need to just hold their freaking water. And Eric Adams got up and said, everybody needs to calm down here now, and we're going to find out what happened. And just because this guy was a Michael Jackson impersonator and he was known on the sub, that is all irrelevant. It doesn't make any difference. We're talking about what happened that day on that subway car. And so those people that want to take this and blow it up into something that it's not, everybody just needs to be forewarned about that. And kudos for Eric Adams for getting out there and telling everybody, hey, take a breath. Of course, I can't say the same thing for that idiot governor that you've got in New York, but what a moron she is. So
Scott Duffey at hatemail.com. Maureen Guichard. Just last year, a homeless man attacked a woman in the subway. Many people saw it but did not intervene. She lost an eye. That is By the way, Eric Adams, the mayor, is former law enforcement. El Rose, it started as a citizen's arrest and ended up accidental death by the sound of it. Like many times, security guards have killed drunk patrons, kicked out of clubs. Sunflower Girl adding in her thoughts here about the subway homicide. I see nothing wrong with someone stepping in to protect others. But a 15-minute chokehold, Phil was just saying, if it was an actual chokehold, and Scott was saying the same thing, this person would have gone out right away.
Well, but can I say something here? But Scott said it in a much nicer way. So therefore, he will not get any hate mail. He'll be talked about how they're going to turn on the Scott Duffey calm recording so that you can sleep at night more peacefully.
I love it.
I need a orange shirt.
There are still more stories. Let's go fly through this last one. It's all we have time for. So there was a guy named Dion Patterson. Another sad story. 24 years old. He had a medical appointment in Atlanta, Midtown Atlanta. He goes into a medical building and just opens fire in the waiting room. Kills one woman who was an employee at the Centers for Disease Control. 4 others are gravely injured. I don't know if any of them have passed. What's interesting about this story, Scott Duffey, is his mother, Mignon Patterson, immediately came out. By the way, Carrie says Phil the Hawaiian Cowboy. But
Paliono.
Yes.
That's what a Hawaiian cowboy. Paliono.
There you go. And right away, the suspect's mother came out, Scott, and she says he doesn't know. He doesn't know right now. His mental illness is very real, and we say it's real from the medical standpoint. It is real. And when someone is saying they need help, or you see they're acting out of sorts, they need help, help them. Just don't regard them. They need help. And as I'm trying to advocate for my son, he was turned away. The injured women were 25, 39, 56, 71. She says that the son suffered from what appeared to be a serious mental illness. Again, Scott, is there anything that we can do as a country? There's a lot of people with mental illness. The vast majority, almost all, will never commit a crime. But this guy, for whatever reason, decided to open fire. I know you're not running for president, but do you have an answer for how to solve all this? And can you do it in under 9 seconds?
I have no answer for it. No, it's
He'll get elected. He'll get elected.
There's it's mental health is one thing, right? The right to ownership of a gun is another thing. The right to protect yourself is another thing. We are a country filled with laws, and we have plenty of laws. And yet, time and time again, a mass shooting takes place. And yes, there is an outcry for this and an outcry for that. And how could we have prevented yet another mass shooting? And time will tell again that there were probably some leakage, and leakage ultimately is somebody tells somebody, I'm thinking of doing this. And so they, whether it be to social media or to somebody that they determined to be a confidant, and ultimately what was done with that information. I do believe there's education over and over and over again of how we can try to get people help. In other words, if somebody tells us something or we read something, we act in such a way that maybe law enforcement and mental health clinicians can come in and quickly do an interview. And if that person in possession of a gun, you take the gun into custody to say so forth and so forth. But what then happens 30 days after that? I don't know what the answer is. I know that we are well into the hundreds of mass shootings for this year alone. And I agree with Phil. Just another law on the books is not going to do anything. It's a piece of paper. So it is a multi-level task. And, something is going on, and we can all identify that it at urgent levels, but I don't have a ready go-to answer to say this will put an end to it. I don't think it exists.
Every time you go in the ocean, you don't think they're around, but sharks are everywhere. Every time you go out, predators are all around. It's a sad reality, I suppose, that guys like Fil and Scott are probably more hyper aware of than the average person. Got Donuts does have the solution. I have the solution, she says, about how she's in Canada, by the way, about how we get America back to a peaceful country. But Joel will have to have me on the show as a guest before I will espouse my solution. But I do have the solution. Got Donuts, I'll have to have you on. Look at this. Abby, the daughter, take a Fil pill. Abby now quoting Phil, take a Fil pill, put the glass of milk down, go back to your mom's basement. Tiffany Hang, I love Scott and Phil. The final story I was going to get to, but I'm not going to get to, but we're going to get to because I'm telling you I didn't get to it. So we'll get some comments on it, is Phil's neck of the woods, a place called Cleveland, Texas. A guy there was firing like an AK, I believe it was. And his neighbor said, please don't fire the weapon. And he then went on to kill all 5 people, including, I believe, an 8-year-old boy. Long story short, there was a manhunt. They got a tip. They found this guy hiding under laundry, and all along he was getting help from a person that is now believed to be his wife, and he was trying to get out of the country. He's a Mexican national. I believe he was deported 4 or 5 times. But it was just an act of insanity. I mean, Phil, this is an offshoot of what I'm about to ask. There's a lot of rage in this country. Someone said, please don't shoot, and he turns around and kills all of them. I am very guilty of this. I like to be a tough guy, I guess. So I will yell when someone cuts me off in the car, and my wife will scream at me for doing that. She says, are you crazy? We're in Florida. They will take out a gun and shoot you. What is your advice to most people, Fil Waters, about anger management, about taking a deep breath, about mahalo? Let's end on an up note here. For example, if you're driving and someone cuts you off, do you just shrug it off? Or what do you do, Phil?
Well, my first thought is usually if they knew I had a gun, they wouldn't have done that. But, I mean, it's irritating, of course, but it's all about self-control. As we've talked about, and it's about choices you make. And some people, I would have to say that the world today, at least in the United States, is so fueled with hate from all different aspects. And I just, I've not seen it like this in my lifetime. That's for sure. And I think it's we've already talked about what I think is the fundamental thing that's being lost here. But I tell you, we didn't get here in a vacuum. This has happened over decades, and now here we are, and we are. These are the repercussions of that particular mindset that was incrementally put into place over the last 60 years. So, look, people, it's people are out for themselves. And I'm just making a very general statement here. These people that are on here that are making the comments that are hateful and I need to be doing this and that. Well, you know what? I don't care what they think about me. I could care less. It's not my purpose to please them. So, and these are the folks that are going to be the first ones to, again, say the hateful things and say the things that are ill-mannered and so forth. So I think it's where we are today. Nobody wants to be held accountable for anything. We should be able just to do what we want to do. It doesn't matter how it affects anybody else. And we have people in places of power that are putting those things on us as a society, and people are, we have abnormal behavior that the more it starts to occur, starts to normalize. And that's what this is all about. This is about taking abnormal behavior and normalizing it. And then when we see it over and over again, people start to think in general that this is the way things are. And it's just not. It's just a big lie. So again, I look, I mean, I have to exhibit self-control just like everybody else is supposed to. I know why I'm able to do that, and I would hope that everyone else would eventually at some point in time come to that realization. But you know what? I mean, people are people, right? And that's just the nature of the beast. Ever since Cain killed Abel and the fall, here we are.
I had
Nothing's changed in terms of human nature.
I had a Boston TV who always said, people, the problem that won't go away. Let's end on some hate mail since we joked about it. So Sean No D's about to give up. I don't understand this. About to give up on these Friday deals. You are asking questions that are in irate, and I hope law enforcement has their man, but you are convicting him on air. This one I love just because it is the first and only person to ever go after Scott Duffey. Let's read this aloud. Look at Scott Duffey.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Malinus says, I really wish Scott was joking, but this is it for me. I will stop watching. This is not fact. I'm not sure where he studied, but I can say this. Violence was apparent when Us was born. Goodbye. I have no idea what Malinus... Scott, do you know what she is referring to? By the way, Scott, I didn't want to... It ends with Scott Duffey, most intelligent assessment of the situation. What is Malinus talking about? I do not know.
I wish I knew.
Well, I think we need to mark that as the first time that a negative word has ever been said against Scott Duffey.
I would have to agree. And this is actually very sad, but I wanted to mention it because El Rose has been very active in this chat. Just a beautiful name. She says, why did they decide to take out others with them? I guess she's talking about the mentally ill. My cousin took his life last year. Very sorry to hear that. PTSD from the military. He suffered in silence, left his wife and two little boys behind. That is a major problem in this country. I don't think the veterans are taken care of. Phil, do you have a solution for that in under 20 seconds? And do you have any final thoughts? You are a military guy. It is a major problem. Any words of comfort for El Rose? Why am I ruining the mood with a horrible ending? But you're a man of wisdom, Phil.
Yeah, I would tell you what. First of all, my prayers go out to El Rose regarding the cousin and that loss. Look, there are something along the lines of 22 military personnel a day that commit suicide. And these guys people don't understand what they've seen, what they've experienced. And there are a lot of great resources out here to help these guys. We've got a place here in the Houston area called Camp Hope. It's an awesome place for military personnel just like this to get there and talk with fellow servicemen and women that have experienced the same thing and try to bring them to a place where they can get their lives back on track. I will tell you that, look, there were more officers in 2021. There were more police officers, law enforcement officers that committed suicide than were killed in the line of duty.
It's terrible.
So the people that are out here serving the public, whether they're hated or not, they're out here, they're giving their lives, their time to protect them. And they do it without question. And they make that sacrifice. And there are a lot of, and now that it's kind of been recognized, there are various resources out there to try to help these folks. In my own experience, I have had 7 of my friends, my colleagues that have committed suicide, law enforcement officers.
That's a huge number.
My 14-year-old nephew, my brother's son, committed suicide 10 years ago. So I'm going to tell all these people out here, I'm well familiar with being empathetic and sympathetic to these folks that go through this. So what I have found is that when folks come to this decision, they have come to a point in their lives for whatever reason, and it differs, but they have reached a point where there is no hope. And that's when they go and do something like this. So, and it's a hard thing to read. Most of the people that do commit suicide, they go and they do it. They don't talk about it. They don't make a lot of noise. They don't draw attention to themselves. And then when those that have left notes, at least in my experience, and I've worked suicides, they apologize to the people that are going to be hurt as a result of what they've done to themselves. So it's a very complicated issue. I mean, in terms of how people deal with these kinds of things. And I know that the haters out there, they hate seeing or hearing about people offering prayers to these folks when these tragedies occur. But I'm going to tell you what, that's the answer to trying to get these people back to some sort of normal perspective. And there's power in it. And I can just tell you that I've walked up to family members and friends. I've had friends of mine whose spouses have committed suicide. Look, I'm not saying this to make anybody think I'm a great guy. I'm just telling you that I've had this experience. And I've always walked up and tried to encourage those folks that I love, that I'm praying for them and praying for some comfort and maybe some answers. And I've never had one of them turn me down. And not all those people were believers. So I'm just going to say that people need to be a little bit more wary of the things that come out of their mouth that are so hateful, and be aware that you never know who it's going to affect, and to take things out of context because you don't like it and turn it into, you're saying the hateful stuff. Well, that's just, you know what? I'm sorry, but that's just a shallow argument, and they're not listening to what they're hearing. They're hearing what they want to hear. So I'll tell you what. After all that, I mean, I just want to close with. I'll close out with, and this will get them going too. So I really like doing this.
Scott at hatemail.com.
But I want to quote John Bernard Books. Does that name ring a bell?
Not to me.
Do you know who John Bernard Books was?
Scott,
well,
help
that
me
was
out
the
here.
character that John Wayne played in The Shootist, which was his last movie. And here's what he said: I won't be wronged. I won't be insulted. I won't be laid a hand on. I don't do these things to other people, and I require the same from them. So that is my closing comment this week. And amen to John Bernard Books.
Deep, and I love it. And even though there's no hope in that very moment, I do agree with Phil. I remember when Anthony Bourdain committed suicide, there was a psychologist on that said something that caught my attention. And they said that almost all people with suicidal ideations within 48 hours can have a totally different outlook. So if you are feeling like it is the end of your rope, you just need to get help. and things can turn around as quickly as a couple of days. So while it feels like there is no hope, there is always hope and light at the end of the tunnel. All you have to do is look at a man like Scott Duffey, the voice of reason, the man who just a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Abby writes, "Oh no, I think Malinus is buzzing off." Yeah, Malinus can buzz right off. She said goodbye, and goodbye to her. Followed here by nothing but respect for Fil and Scott. I love Fridays with Fil and Scott. Daughter Abby, this has been a great show and a great chat today. Look at Abby taking care of me. Don't forget to put your DNA on the like button, like that one STS member says. Yeah, I don't know who that is, but yeah, there is one who always says that, but we do appreciate it. Scott Duffey, it got heavy at the end, Scott. It got heavy. It's a Friday. Any positive thoughts to end the week, Scott? Are you any fun plans? By the way, The Shootist was filmed in Carson City. Look how educated STS Nation is. Scott, end the show with something positive, Scott. No pressure.
I love everybody.
Well, I do too, Scott. So we're in agreement with that.
I think we are all three in agreement. We discuss real topics, and there are really bad people out there, and I think we have all met some of them, and or many of them. But I totally agree with Fil with regards to positive outlook, and that we must keep forging on. Hope is absolutely obtainable, and that's it for Friday.
Last time Scott was going out for St. Patty's Day. Today his Mexican roots will come out. It is Cinco de Mayo. If you guys are out having fun, make sure to use an Uber driver. Don't drink and drive. Scott and Fil say no bueno. Annie says, thank you for sharing your expertise and wisdom, Fil and Scott. Thank you for a great show. And we'll end on this. We need more tough nuts like Fil and Caden. On that note, thank you guys so much. I love Fridays. It's a time to have interesting conversation and get these guys really amazing perspective. These guys are both heroes in my eyes. They serve the country. And Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, we are going to do a show with this lovely lady about the Menendez brothers. Things are heating up with that. Famed criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos is all over it, asking for either a retrial or the convictions to be vacated. Fil shaking his head no, but we'll see where we're going with this documentary out. The court of public opinion is humming right now. I'm reading some comments here about John Wayne. People hate the truth. Caden says, by the way, Fil, I'll leave you on this note. My mother, who I didn't even know she knew who John Wayne is, but my mother is very cultured, very smart, and an intellectual. And one day I was whining to her, which I have a habit of doing. Jewish boys have a habit of whining to their mothers. And I was whining to her to her one day. And she said to me, be the quiet, strong, silent type like John Wayne. And literally the next day I went into some random vintage store and there was a cigarette lighter with John Wayne on it. And I bought that cigarette lighter and it is sitting in a medicine cabinet in my home. And every time I open that medicine cabinet, I see John Wayne and I say, in my next life, I will be like Fil and John Wayne. I will be the strong, silent type. But until then,
that's awesome.
Till then, I will whine and complain. Till next time, love you, America. Thanks for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo.